Okay, so the next section is going to be dodging and burning. And there's something that I do that's a little different from anything that I've seen from other people, but I always was kind of wondering why they don't do it this way. And it just saves a lot of time. So what I'm going to do is, this image already has light and dark values to it. And the way to really get into the skin and see the light and dark values that are there is to put a adjustment layer that's called black and white on top. And we're going to take down the yellow and the red and just kind of play with them until we get a nice contrast from light to dark on the face. And you can see, you know, that it's still kind of blotchy in terms of like, okay, there's light here, there's dark here, light here, dark here, and it kind of makes the face look, the only way I can describe it is bumpy, you know, and you don't want the face to look bumpy, you want it to look smooth. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make a copy of this. I'm going to do Shift Control Alt E. So we just have this image as an image on top now. I'm going to delete, I'm not going to delete that, but I'm going to turn off the eye again. I'm going to hit this, and I'm going to just do the highlights. So right there, I'm going to make another file out of that. So Control Shift Alt Control E, and now I'm going to go back here again, turn that off, and I'm going to go the complete opposite direction with that and bring everything up and hit the same thing, Shift Control Alt E. And now I'm going to get rid of this black and white layer. All this stuff is a little advanced. If you've been using Photoshop for a while, it shouldn't be too hard, but you might want to go back and rewatch kind of what I'm doing here. Basically what I'm trying to do is create these files so that I can overlay the dark part of this and the light part of this. And I will get kind of a dodging and burning effect. I'll have to dodge and burn on top of it, but I like to use this because it's kind of a quick way to have highlights and things. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do on top of all this is do a little gray square, and I'm going to fill that with gray. And so now we have our gray square here. If you remember, when you overlay, the gray will disappear because it's the medium value between light and dark. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to create a layer here, and we're going to try to bring up the darks here so that they end up being, I'm going to hit Control L, and I'm going to bring up the blacks until they kind of match where that gray area is. So let's see here. So right about there is pretty good. If you blur your eye, then you can kind of see that that blends together. Okay, so now I'm going to hit Overlay. And you can see now that this is giving us all these really nice highlights. I'm going to hit Blur. I'm going to blur this just a little bit. I'm hitting Control B, but you can go up to the filter and blur. Like I said, I have Control B set on my computer. It's not universal on Photoshop though. And I'm going to bring this down until it looks a little more natural. And then I don't want this to affect the background, so I'm just going to hit Alt on the alpha channel, and I'm just going to fill this in on her face and maybe the hair and everything. So we're only seeing the effects of this on her and not the background. And you can kind of fill in her arm here where this highlight might be. Okay. Now we're going to go to the next layer below it, and this is just going to be the highlight. So I'm going to do Screen, and we're going to bring this way down. I'm going to hit L and make sure the blacks are really just black, and the only thing that we're seeing are these little highlights. So I'll see, there we go. And I'm going to bring this, I'm going to Alt drag this alpha channel down, so we're only affecting her face. And I'm going to bring this way down. But the thing that we're trying to do is really bring out her skin and the texture. So there we go. I'm going to break this down just a little more, and you can kind of play with these adjust them until they look more realistic. Okay. So here we go with this. Here we go with this. And you can see her eye is really getting super detailed now. And the dark layer, you could probably guess, we're going to do the same thing but backwards. So we're going to turn on our gray layer again. And we're going to hit Control L. And now we're going to match the gray to her face. So we're going to bring the white down until it kind of matches where the gray is. Okay, let's see. Let's move the gray over here. And that's pretty close, so we'll just leave it there. And I'm going to do overlay. And then I'm going to bring this way down to maybe 15. And again, I'm going to hit Alt and drag down the alpha channel. And in this case, I think I'm going to keep bringing this down a little bit more. And we don't want to have so much. I'm going to kind of take it off where we have the highlights and just allow this to affect the darker parts of the image. It really should only be affecting the darker parts of the image, but just gives us a little change there. Okay, so I'm going to take all these guys in the gray and I'm just going to adjust them. You know, I'm going to kind of go back and forth and see what looks good. And you know, this is at around 60. I think it looks pretty natural. So now what I'm going to do is hit Shift Control Alt E. Now we have all those things again in one layer. And you know, you can always delete these and kind of eyeball and see how far we've gone, how much it's, you know, how much the image has changed, because sometimes you can't tell. And sometimes if I feel like I've gone too far, what I'll do is I'll take a layer from the bottom and bring it up to the top and then bring it down to about 10. So it just gives you a little more, or you can kind of put it on top and say, okay, where do I want it to, where does it look natural? So there we go. Control. Every time that I make a new layer, it's always the Shift Control Alt E. And so what I did was I just took the layer from the very bottom and put it at about, you know, 20 on top of it. And so this looks very natural. Okay. Now, on top of this, I'm going to do another layer. And this is going to be more of a traditional dodging and burning. So I will use this to try to smooth out the bumpiness of the skin. So fill, 50% gray. And I'm going to go over here to the dodge tool. Actually, I'm going to put this on soft light. And what I'm going to do, the way that I like to dodge and burn, is to just kind of have my finger on the right and left brackets and just kind of do things slowly and you know, change the size of the brush as I'm working on it. And you're going to want to, this is really going to help you to smooth in everything so that you don't have this bumpiness again. You can see I'm just kind of constantly changing. I'm working with midtones. I have exposure at 5, so you're never, you know, overdoing it. And you can kind of get in with those deep, you know, the shines and things. And you don't want to put white where there's not white already. You want to, you know, try and work with what you already have here, or else it's going to look a little unnatural. The areas you typically want to add the white, the dodging is, you know, here on the forehead, under the eyes, the cheeks, and the chin. Now you can see that for whatever reason, the way the shading is, it's made her face look a little more chubby, and that's not reality. So I'm gonna have to go back and change that a little bit. So I'm gonna go over the highlights here, bring up the highlights in her arm. You're really trying to make things look kind of three-dimensional too, you know. So if you ever took a drawing class and they made you make the sphere, this is why, because you want to understand how shading is going to, you know, bring out that three-dimensionality. The things that you maybe didn't do the right way when you were lighting it in the studio. Okay, so here, just a little bit there. And yeah, this doesn't look great, you know. So that's why we're going to bring it down a little bit. But first, now we're going to burn. And the burning, we're just going to go over all the areas that are dark. Especially like this little area under the chin, this little divot thing, the area around her eyes. You want to make sure that you have nice contrast with the eyes, especially on top. And need to blend this a little better here. And yeah, this doesn't look great. So what I'm going to do is just hit blur, so it blurs together a little better. And we'll bring this down. And I won't say that's the worst job at dodging and burning I've ever done, but it ranks. It ranks. It's in there. Okay, so let's get the dark areas darker. Now make sure that we get this nice shape of the arm. Very, very subtle. You know, you'll only really notice it when you look at it without it. Okay. See in this area, I really think that I didn't do very well. So I'm going to blur this. Select this area to blur. And there really are no rules. I mean, you can do this any way that you feel works right for you. So I'll blur that a little bit, see if that looks better. Bring it down. Does that look better or worse? And I think I'm going to... Okay, so I'm going to double click on this. And one thing that I do a lot of times when I'm dodging and burning is I'll bring up both the dark and light here. If you click on Alt, you can drag those down and it'll make the whatever layer you have, this is allowing the blacks, everything dark, to come from underneath that layer. And it's instead of just purely blocking it out at whatever layer that is, it kind of lets it fade in. And this guy too, it's whatever layers are more light on the bottom, it'll allow that layer to kind of be more of a gradient. Okay, so let's see how this looks. Bring it back up a little more. Bring it down. And how does that look? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and click and create a layer out of that. And I think we've smoothed the skin just a little bit more. We've made it a little bit less bumpy. And we can really see that if we go further down. I'll bring it down just a little bit, make another layer out of that. And I'm constantly doing that, like changing, you know, adjusting the top layer and then bringing it down and then making a copy. And then, like, for example, I look at these two, and if I want to bring that layer down just a little bit, I'll take down the opacity, and then instead of working with that layer, I'll take the combination of them. I'll make a copy of that one and put it on top. Okay, so next is going to be working with eyes. So we will see you in the next episode.